So here's another thing I wanted to get into. And this came directly from the source. This was sent to me by Tim Canova. Who is Tim Canova? Well, Tim Canova ran for Congress against Debbie Wasserman Schultz twice in a district that is known for having a lot of corruption. And the first time he ran, ballots were illegally destroyed, and the verdict's out on whether or not he actually may have won. We'll never know. And people had to step down because of this. Election officials had to step down because of what happened. And in this most recent race, despite having this huge grassroots effort, and despite almost beating her 2 years prior, and potentially he did beat her, we will never know for sure. But the official results, of course, were he didn't. But that's, we'll never know. So despite all that, despite 2 more years of campaigning, despite being part of a national movement, which I know doesn't always translate locally, but still, he allegedly only received 5% of the vote. Now, I find this nearly impossible to believe. It does not make any sense. And there were some really skewed abnormalities there. Like, apparently he had the exact same turnout with every demographic. Apparently the percentage from each demographic was exactly the same. Which I believe the likelihood of that ever happening in an election is, like, that's the equivalent of winning the lottery twice. That's the likelihood of that happening, I believe. So there are some huge red flags in all this. And Tim wrote an update. And this was sent to me by Tim. And I was a supporter of Tim's, to be totally upfront about my own biases. I was a supporter of Tim Canova. I still am. I'm a Tim Canova fan, so I'll acknowledge my own biases there. But here you go. Important update on our election challenge case. I am writing to bring you up to date on the latest developments in our efforts to expose the corruption in our election system. Some weeks ago, I filed a lawsuit in Florida Circuit Court contesting the results of our November 6, 2018 election against Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Our lawyers then provided notice to the clerk of the U.S. House of Representatives of our challenge and submitted a complaint requesting that the House not seat Wasserman Schultz. Make no mistake, there are solid grounds for questioning our election results. For nearly 100,000 votes reportedly cast for Wasserman Schultz, there was no indication of where, when, or how the ballots were actually cast. According to computer programming experts, this is an indication that those votes could have been shifted from me or another candidate to Wasserman Schultz by hackers or insiders simply altering the software source code through the wireless cellular modems on the electronic scanning and tabulator machines used in Broward County. Which, again, Broward County, that's another thing here. Broward County was the county who in 2000 shit the bed and just handed the election to Bush. So they've been notorious for corrupt election results since the year 2000. And that software is closed source, meaning it's considered proprietary, the private property of the software vendors. Also, there's video footage of people just transporting votes in vans. They wouldn't answer any questions. People caught them on camera. They just had these vans full of votes. No one knew who they were with, where they were coming from. And they just had all these votes in their vans. You can find those videos. There's also compelling statistical evidence of election rigging. Our campaign was capped at an unlikely 5% of the vote. More likely, all right, so he's bringing up something that I mentioned. Moreover, we were capped at that level for every demographic group. Something so unbelievable that a leading expert in computer... Oh, okay, so here's actually what he says. A leading expert in computational science concluded it was as likely as winning the lottery every day for a year. So I was actually understating when I said it's like winning the lottery twice. No, it's like winning it every day for a year. Those who talk about the need to follow the science of climate change should follow the science of statistics and mathematics. There's also no reason to trust a recount of the purported ballots. The disgraced former Broward election supervisor, Brenda Snipes, that's the person that needed to step down, and other election officials failed to safeguard the chain of custody of the paper ballots, the electronic voting machines, and the digital scanned ballot images. That's why we're not seeking a recount, but rather asking the House to invalidate the election results and to order a revote. Unfortunately, when the new Congress convened last week, the House voted to seat Wasserman Schultz without any inquiry into our election results. It's deja vu all over again. After a Florida court ruled last May that Brenda Snipes had illegally destroyed all the ballots cast in our 2016 Democratic primary against Wasserman Schultz, we just talked about that, I wrote to every House and Senate member. The silence was deafening. The U.S. Constitution makes clear that the House is the final judge of the qualifications and elections of its members. Now that the House has seated Wasserman Schultz, our lawsuit is effectively moot. The good news is that even though Wasserman Schultz has been seated, there's nothing stopping the House Committee for Administration from conducting hearings on our fake election, invalidating the election, and ordering a revote. There's much more at stake here than one congressional district. This system of black box voting undermines public faith and confidence in our election results. If the electronic voting machines were rigged in Broward County, they can be rigged almost anywhere. If we fail to clean up this corrupt election system now, electronic voting machines may well be rigged in some of the 2020 presidential primaries and general elections, and perhaps not by the Russians or Chinese. That's why I've been calling for banning these inherently vulnerable electronic voting machines and replacing them with a system of 100% hand-marked paper ballots counted by hand in public. Nothing less will help restore the conditions necessary for a functioning democracy. I agree with that. Until we get something better and more secure, paper ballots are the way to go. And there have been some progress on that front, and I wish Tim Canova all the luck in the world in this fight and all the best in the world in this fight, and I want to help any way I can because I don't for one second buy the results of 2018 or 2016 for that matter, and this is a county that has been notorious since the year 2000. So when you add all those things up, there are way too many red flags to ignore. There's just way too many abnormalities. And bravo to Tim and the people that are still fighting this fight. And this is one of the reasons that I kind of migrate more towards cause-based initiatives and local alliance initiatives over beating my head against the wall about electoral politics nonstop. Because when you see stuff like this, you realize we really got to overhaul this system, and it's going to start from the ground up. And that's just the reality of it. So I wish Tim all the luck in the world in this fight, and I hope there's some positive news.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make